Hello, Brad. Hi. Thank you so much for joining the Introscope Internal Communication series, Spotlight series, which I run on my blog. And very delighted to have you talk to the audience about creativity in communications. It's an important topic. Not many people give a lot of value to it. And I'm so glad that I have you to talk about it. So before we get started, Brad, if you could quickly introduce yourself for our audience.
Sure. Brad Whitworth. I live in Northern California, just a little north of San Francisco in wine country. I've been in communications for far too many years. Started out doing some in financial services, been in nonprofits, but most of my career has been working for tech-based companies. Some global giants like Hewlett Packard and Cisco, Hitachi, what is now Oracle, and have had an opportunity to be involved with IABC over the course of my career as well, the International Association of Business Communicators, having served in local chapters and also at the international levels, everything all the way up to the chairman of the International Executive Board for the organization. So career spent in mostly internal communications, but also executive communications. Have done a fair share of public relations as well. So a long career and most of it focused on high-tech communications, but the topic of creativity, I think, is one that just resonates with me.
Brilliant, brilliant. Yeah, I know you have an illustrious background, and I'm so glad to have you talk to us. So, let's begin by asking, so again, like I said, creativity is not something which is often spoken about, but what, according to you, is the relevance of creativity in business communication? And especially, I'm curious to know about internal comms and employee comms. Really, how does it play out?
Well, and I will say most of my life has been spent in doing employee communications. So I actually wrote the chapter of the IABC Handbook of Organizational Communications about internal communications.
Right,
So I know a little bit about the topic. I guess I see creativity is the force that really separates the memorable from the mundane.
right,
And what's interesting to me is that when we get into the communications world and start doing things for our clients or for a corporation or for the government or whatever the group is, too often we settle for the simple, the quick, the easily
right,
approved, something that's just going to get through the system and let us mark it off of our to-do list. Um,
right,
and I think paired with that, we've also been trained over the years to follow best practices, to look at what
mm,
everybody else is doing,
right,
to not reinvent the wheel, just sort of follow in the path of everyone else. And
right,
that often lets us sort of settle for something that may not be creative, may not break through the white noise. And there is
right.
so much sort of competition for
True,
employees' attention today that
right,
creativity is the element that's going to allow you to break through that sort of white noise and get people to focus on the message, to get them either to change their minds about a topic
right,
or to change their behaviors. So we need to
true.
find ways to implement creative solutions as much as possible.
Fantastic.
I have been an evaluator for years on communication awards programs, everything from the Silver Quill Awards to Gold Quill at IABC and others. And I think when I look at what separates those truly exceptional programs that just like blow you out of the water from
Right,
just sort of that merely acceptable is the creativity, that spark of creativity. It grabs your attention, it makes you sit up, it makes you take notice of what's going on. And the other thing that I think really sets it apart is people measure and can show
mm,
that by
right,
doing something a little bit more creative, you actually end up with better results. And
right.
that's what we're really all striving for, is coming up with something that gets people's attention, gets them to change their minds with behaviors, and is effective.
Great, absolutely. No, I think it's a great segue to my next question because I read a recent report which says that in internal comms, almost 93% of professionals believe creativity is important, but when it comes to practicing it, they feel, just about 6% of them truly believe it really happens at the workplace. So why do you think there's such a gap?
Wow. Probably lots of reasons. Maybe one of the first ones is what we talked about in terms of just time pressure. You're being asked to do more with less, and so you settle for the quickest, easiest way about going about and doing things. I also think that over time, we've also had to learn to deal with audiences that have shorter attention spans. So that means we have to write shorter or edit our videos to a little bit tighter package. And sometimes that doesn't allow you to be as creative as perhaps you'd hoped. I think many organizations, you have to deal with very, very onerous approval processes. And sometimes maybe you put something in that you felt was creative and a little bit different, and you don't really want to fight the powers to be able to sort of stand up for it and say, no, this is right, and here's why we should do it. So I think one of the things we as communications people have to do is make sure that we're always fighting that complacency and that sort of willingness to simply settle for the ordinary and find ways to at least push and push and push to achieve that 93%, say it's effective, and get the actual implementation up from the single digits. Maybe we won't be at 93%, but make people feel better about the fact that I've done something that is effective and shows creativity. You know, I think one of the things that I always look at, and we can talk a little about sources of inspiration, but Clio award-winning television advertisements. You know, these come from around the world, and you don't need to speak the language. When you see one, you just sort of go, that's creative. That broke through. It's not like the stuff that I'm seeing all the time that's sort of mundane. And you sort of applaud the people who do it. I actually did an exercise one time. I was asked to do a webinar, actually a seminar. There was when we did it in person in Tokyo for a Japanese audience. All agency people and company people. And the topic was about how can you evaluate advertising agency creative work? And part of it was for me to be able to establish a credibility. It's like, why would this person who doesn't speak the language be able to give advice on Japanese advertising agency output? And I talked a little bit about the Clio, where I also had given them copies of Nikkei Business Magazine, which is the weekly business publication, 70, 80 pages thick. And I said to the class through an interpreter, while we are getting ready for class, look through the magazine because we'll be using that in class. Then the first exercise that I had them do was to tell me which ads in the magazine they remembered. And they came up with a list of maybe 8. So this is an unaided recall test. And then what we did was we put those 8 onto a 2x2 grid on the ones that were effective and the ones that you liked. And so we were looking for things that were that they thought were effective, they got their message across, and that they had some sort of appeal. After I finished doing this chart for them, I flipped the page over on the flip chart and showed them a grid that I had made the day before, where I had 3 of the same ads in that same quadrant. And I said, I mean, I had done this just by looking at the ads more so than reading them, because I cannot read kanji or hiragana or katakana. So it's like how did I know which ones? And it gets back to creativity shines through. It's an element that speaks a universal language. And I think it's one that we need to try to strive for every day.
Brilliant. That's a great example. I like that. And if I were to kind of go back to the basic definition of what creativity is, because sometimes it gets confused with being innovative. So how do you kind of differentiate between the two?
Well, I think they are very, very closely related. Maybe they're co-joined twins, or maybe it's overlapping circles in a Venn diagram or something. I guess when I hear about the word innovation, and perhaps it's because I've hung around the tech people for too long, I also think that tends to be, at least in my mind, more focused on things like processes, strategies, approaches, specific tools that we're going to use to be more innovative. And innovative often I see is associated with sort of efficiency and effectiveness. Where I see creativity focused is more on the execution and delivery within that framework of innovation. So you come up with this spark of the how I'm going to do it. And then to me, the creativity is the implementation and the delivery thereof, not just the thing that's hidden in the back.
Right, right, brilliant. And is this according to you a skill that can be developed, and if at all, how can communicators kind of build this?
Yeah. I think we all have it somewhere in our system.
Right,
Sometimes it's waiting to be unleashed or waiting for that opportunity when the door, the window opens that allows us to be able to come in with something innovative. I think part of it, though, is that we need to inspire ourselves all the time.
right, right,
And whether it's watching the reel that has all the Clio award-winning television ads, or
right,
it's when IABC announces the Gold Quill Awards and there are case studies that are posted. It's like, find out how someone did that award-winning stuff because there's
right.
usually, a write-up of something like
Yeah.
that. I think it also means sometimes getting out of our own comfort zone and exposing
Mm,
ourselves to ideas that may be different from what it is that we see every day. I
right,
know when I was working for Hewlett Packard, and I was based in the US, but the territory that I covered was Asia Pacific and Latin America. And
right.
I made it a point to not read just the US media. I mean, all of my
Mm,
colleagues were reading Fortune magazine, Forbes magazine, Business Week, the New York Times. I wanted to
right.
get hold of things like the South China Morning Post or
Mm,
the Financial Review or
right,
the English language edition of Nikkei to find
right.
out what others were thinking. I think
Mm,
we need to get out if it's possible. I mean, there's lockdown and pandemic things, but
right, right,
go to a show in a museum that might not
right,
necessarily be our first choice. Read a book that offers a very, very different perspective or from a different genre from what it is that we're reading all the time. Sort of like get
right.
out of our own comfort zone because I think one of the things that we have to do with creativity is come up with things that appeal to a very, very broad audience and
True.
not just people who look like me, read like me, understand things like me, but
Yeah.
have that universal appeal that we were talking
Right.
about when we talk about things like awards.
Mm,
And then I also think that there's something that we can learn because you asked about can you learn this? Can you train
yeah.
yourself? Um,
Right.
the whole field of jazz music.
Hmm.
I've become a bit of a fan of all sorts of jazz, but
Right.
there are a few people around here that do smooth jazz, which is sort of
Hmm.
a softer, easier to listen to sometimes. What I
Right.
found is that so many of the musicians that I enjoy listening to have been classically trained. I mean, not all of
Mm,
them. I mean, there are some geniuses can sit down and sort of play anything, anytime. But
right.
what I like about jazz is that it's someone who knows the rules. They could sit down and play a Mozart minuet and read a score beautifully.
Right.
However, these are people who can deviate from that and do
Right.
so effectively, and it's still something that's pleasing to our ears, and it
Right.
may be slightly different each time they go through it. And to
Right.
me, that's sort of what it's all about. Is as a communications person, I need to
Right.
know what the rules are and how the game is played, but I also need
Right.
to know that it's okay to be able to break those rules in just the right
Mm,
ways to be able to have that
right.
breakthrough and to be able to reach people in a new way that gets their attention and gets
Right.
them to do something besides hit the delete key on that email that's one of 250 that arrived in their inbox that
Right.
morning.
Right. No, I mean, I like that point. In fact, what you're calling out is the agility and the flexibility of the communicator to think differently and break the rules. And I think the next question is really about, you mentioned that at the workplace there's so much of pressure. There are timelines. There are other forces working against the communicator. In that kind of context, uh, how can the communicator make it part of the everyday? I mean, how do you bring creativity into everything that you do?
Well, it's not easy. I think you have to look for the right opportunities. One
Right.
of the things I also think is that you need to, well, constantly be measuring your results. And so
Right.
if you can come up with data that shows that this thing that I did, that I was a little bit able to do something a little bit more creative, scored really well. It was able
Right.
to achieve our goals. It was able to help reach people that might not have been able to reach before. If you can
Right.
show numerically that what you're
Yeah.
doing has effect, I
Yeah.
think you stand a better chance of being able to, receive a little bit more license the next time around. But I also
Right.
think that it's up to us to push the envelope. I know when I mentioned traveling Asia Pacific and Latin America, often I would say, I need to understand a little bit more about how your culture, how your system works, because it's not the same as what I grew up with. At the same time, let me explain a little bit about why things are done this way. However, if you find a reason why you need to break those rules or do something, go for it. So part of me is that, if you were setting up traffic cones, it's like this is where you're supposed to be in these lanes, but it's okay to, for a good reason, go out of the lanes for a little while. I think that proving your effectiveness, one of the things we're also hampered with on that lack of time is very rarely do we have a chance to test concepts and sort of do an A/B kind of a focus group activity and see, is this one going to reach an audience and be more effective than that one? And I guess I would encourage us to, we're usually in internal communications charged with this all employee message and the reaching everyone. And I think we need to start looking at sort of discrete audiences and maybe let's try something over here that maybe we aren't doing for the rest of the organization yet. See if it's effective, and then we can roll it out a little bit more broadly. That's one way to be able to sort of add the creativity in, test the concepts, and then have the results to be able to say, let's do this everywhere.
Brilliant, brilliant. And I know you've been associated with IABC, like you mentioned, for 40 years, and you've done a host of, work. And most recently, you co-authored this book with multiple others, leaders. Tell us a bit more about, some of that, and what is your linkage to, and how do you bring in creativity into some of those areas?
Well, I think it's been a blast to be able to see our profession sort of grow up over the time that I've been associated with IABC, and even before that. I mean, there were times when notice board programs and employee newsletters in print were sort of the state of the art and cutting edge, and we have come so far in terms of technology. We also have seen a democratization of the profession in that everyone in some ways is a communications person. Our role has changed from being both the creator and the distributor to more one of the curator and finding ways to help people be more effective in their communications roles, whether it's the senior most leaders or others. I also think we have all sorts of research available to us that we didn't have before. Innovative companies that are finding ways that instead of sending a message out to all employees, there is a group out of Denmark called Innovisor that tells us that by reaching just 3% of your employee population, those 3% can, as sort of internal social influencers, reach 90+% of your audience. So new ways to go about doing our roles has been fun to me, to be able to sort of stay up on top of, because it is this changing profession, and be a part of by capturing it and sharing it and writing it. Involved, for example, IABC's Fellows, and I'm lucky enough to have been named a Fellow a few years ago. We have a monthly circle of fellows where a group of us four will get together with our host, Shell Holtz, and talk about some of the concepts and things that we see that are innovative, creative, and effective. And so staying on top of it on a changing field is really critical. And that's one of the things that I've been involved with in the last couple of years. Besides working on the book, the IABC handbook, and most recently this brand new primer that we've put out. They're both very, very good at capturing sort of state of the art. But the other thing I think is that we need to prove to ourselves, and also maybe to our bosses and some of the people around us, that we are on top of the game. And some of that can come through certification. Most recently, I've been, first it was vice chair and now chair, and then past chair this year of the group called the GCCC, the Global Communications Certification Council. We started out by offering a certification called the Communications Management Professional, CMP. We've added Strategic Communications Management Professional, SCMP. And the best thing about these certification testing programs is that they have been accredited by the international standards organizations, Sometimes you see ISO standards for quality of products, but they also have standards for individuals, people.
Right.
And I think this ISO standard, which is a global standard that we, sort of follow, is important because it tells us that we have to stay up on top of our program every year. We have to do continuing education units. We have to do all the kinds of things that we were talking about earlier. You need to read, you need to go to seminars, you need to write, you need to go to webinars. And I think that is making a difference. I think it's certification to me is one of those signals to the rest of the world and to yourself that you know the rules of the game, and you have to sort of think about how that applies in the working world. For example, you could go to an accountant for your taxes and finances who's not certified, or you could go to a certified accountant, and you have a choice. We see it in things like surgeons. There are surgeons who are board certified by local medical organizations, and then there are surgeons who aren't. And I think if I were going to have some sort of surgery performed, I'd rather go to somebody who's board certified. I think we're going to see the same thing happen over time in communications. And certification to me is more than just that credential that proves your value to the world. I think it also lets you build confidence in yourself and your work to know that what you're doing is amongst the best in the world. So the book is probably a great place, if you know a lot about one part of the communications profession, to pick up a book and read about something you don't know, which covers everything from metrics. Angela Sinicus did a great job writing about that. Or Shel Holtz has written about some of the technology and its implications in communications. Pick up this IABC Guide for Practical Business Communications and sort of bone up on the things where you don't feel strong. Read the things where you're already comfortable and see if you agree or you can take it to that next level. I was asked to write something about leading the communications function, which I've had a chance to do in different organizations. And it's also a challenge, I think, for an author to be able to put down what is it that, how can I explain this in the fewest possible words with a little bit of creativity. And even my chapter, I think we did in, I'll say, a creative way, in that we just sort of took a fictitious new chief communications officer through here are the things that you need to worry about and why you need to worry about them and how you sell things. So it's not perhaps as academically written as some of the other chapters, but I think it's also one that will stand out and let people connect.
Brilliant. I love that summary. Thank you so much. And as we wrap up, Brad, just wanted to ask you, now that we have gone through the pandemic and it's still not over, but nevertheless, organizations have been disrupted in the way they work and the workplaces have changed. So how does creativity fit into all of this in terms of communications, and what must communicators really think about in the post-pandemic world?
Well, I hope that in some ways the pandemic is allowing us to hit a reset button on many things. It's certainly in terms of the workplace and the way work is done. We've come through and probably are still going through a period that is asking us to question, just because we did something a certain way for a long time, is that necessarily the best way? And I think the same really does apply to us on the communications side of things as well. I think one of those elements that we've seen is executives who used to lean on us so much for, could you prepare the briefing for me for the meeting that we're going to do, and could you put together all the slides for me for the presentation? Many of them have been forced to do what we're doing, which is have a conversation with employees that comes from the heart, and you get to see where they live, which you never got to see before. Maybe we'll free up some time from doing some of those things and find that our leaders are capable of doing a few more things on their own without us having to put together a slide deck that the audience has found boring and that was not as effective and not a great use of our time doing it. And maybe this is the time to start this movement that allows us to unleash some of the potential that has been bottled up inside of all of us that we were talking about earlier. It's probably there, and we just need to come up with the ways to do things. I remember not that long ago, I think sometimes it's up to us to push an idea that may seem, I don't want to say radical or just different or breakthrough. I had a new executive from Japan who I had to introduce to an audience, a global audience. And what I try to figure is that how can I get this person to do something that might be out of the ordinary that people would relate to? And what I came up with was, it turns out this person's father and his brother had worked for the same organization in a different part of the company. And what I did was have him tell a little bit of story of why this company was so important to the family. He said, but my father and brother, what I want to do is take a picture of me with all of you to send. And so they ended up doing one of these selfie things where he jumped down into the audience and took a picture with, and he said, and if you've taken a picture, send it to me because I want to share these with my dad, who's retired. And it was sort of an unusual behavior, not what the audience was expecting. It also sort of broke down that fourth wall that here's somebody on stage, here's the audience. It became one, and it became one where people wanted to have a picture taken with the new CEO. So they were like crowding in on things. So when I proposed it, there were some people like, I'm not sure that that's in keeping with his demeanor. But I said, if they can do this at the Academy Awards programs and somebody jumps into the audience and takes selfie, why can't we do that as well? And when I proposed it, he loved the idea. And so I think some of it is upon us to come up with these new ways of doing things and just sort of proposing changes that are effective, that break through, that show that there's that creative spark in all of us.
Brilliant, Brad. I think this opened my eyes to a whole lot of new ways of approaching comms. Thank you so much. I'm sure this will be very, very valuable for our viewers.
Yeah, thank you for your time too, and great to see if we can't get some more disciples headed into bringing creativity into the workplace and making them more effective and their audiences more efficient.
Absolutely. Okay.